Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello and thank you for downloading Transcending Sport here on Wisp Sports. This is Season 5, Episode 2, and I'm Chris Stafford. We head across to Ireland for this episode to take a look at the challenges that they face to get girls into sport and to retain them. And our guest is Nora Stapleton, who last year took up the role with Sport Ireland to lead women in sport. Nora has an extensive background in sport, from grassroots level all the way up to representing her country. She worked for 6 years at the Gaelic Athletic Association as Games Promotional Officer with Ballinteer St Johns GAA club in Dublin. And her role involved coaching children day to day in schools and the club, whilst also running camps and coaching workshops. In 2013, she joined the Irish Rugby Football Union as the Women and Girls Development Manager. This role carried a national remit and involved developing programmes and strategies to advance the growth of women in rugby in Ireland. On the field, Nora has played Intercounty Gaelic Football for Donegal, winning 2 All-Ireland medals in 2003 and 2010. In 2017, she retired from International Rugby with 50 caps, having played in 3 Women's Rugby World Cups. She was selected to play on the first ever Women's Barbarian team in 2017. And nowadays, she's a coach with the old Belvedere Rugby Football Club. But we'll be hearing about her day job now, which is with Sport Ireland, because they have an extensive remit to increase female involvement across all areas of sport, from participation to visibility, coaching and officiating, to leadership and governance. Nora, thank you for joining me and welcome to the programme.
Thanks very much for having me, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about where you're based there.
Yeah, so I'm the Women in Sport lead here in Sport Ireland. We're based in Dublin, so I work out of our National Sports Campus, which is a lovely facility that's constantly growing with more and more different NGBs or national governing bodies, equipment and facilities popping up for them. So it's a very pleasant place to work. But I've been here since April of 2019, so not nearly a year in the role, I guess, but so far so good anyway, and I'm enjoying the role.
Well, you've a big job there then, Nora, haven't you, to implement the Women in Sport policy, but your background is sport all the way. Let's talk a little bit about your sporting career then before we get into Women in Sport Ireland and the policy you have there, because you started in Gaelic football, did I see?
I was, probably like every child coming through in Ireland, we all played Gaelic football or camogie at some stage in our lives. So, I was one of those children that played an awful lot of sport, have always loved sport. When I was deciding what I was going to do in college, I knew that I wanted to do something in sport, but I won't show my age, but put it like this, there weren't very many courses other than PE back then if you wanted to work in the sporting environment. But I happened to come across a brand new course which was being rolled out of UCD called Sports Management, so went for that and have just since then have been working in various sporting organisations. So I got my first job working for the GAA, the Gaelic Athletic Association. So that would have been very much on the ground, grassroots, coaching in schools, in the club, trying to recruit more players, upskilling parents, running coaching courses, summer camps, all the likes. So that was a really enjoyable job. I worked for a local GAA club for about 6 years doing that, but had my sights set on maybe progressing a little bit more. I saw that there was a particular niche growing in women's rugby, and at that stage I had moved from playing just Gaelic football and soccer to dabbling a little bit in rugby, and then find that this could be a sport that might suit me. Actually was lucky enough to get on the Irish team, and saw that there was that space for the growth of women's rugby. So I looked about trying to get into a job in that area, and was really fortunate to, at the same time, a job came up in Nora Review for the Women and Girls Development Manager. So I then moved across to that for about another 6 years. So that's a couple of trends there. But yeah, so far, you know, it's been great working across sport for the last 12 years.
Well, you've also then, obviously, because of your coaching, had a real flavour, taste of what it's like to get girls into sport and keep them in sport as well. So that would have served you well, I would imagine, for the job that you have now.
I think so. You know, I think it's important to have a flavour of the various areas within sports. So as I said, I started at grassroots level and did an awful lot of coaching. When I was working for the IRFU, I would have still been involved with coaching in some elements, but I would have also progressed more to maybe, I guess, policy implementation and strategy development and things like that, as it was more of a national role. So rather than hands-on approach on the ground and in clubs, I was more overseeing programs or developing programs to get more girls involved. So I guess it was about taking all of those elements then into this role, which, you know, the role I have now in Sport Ireland is across all sports. So it's all about women and girls development, but not just in that participation side of things. So it's not only about getting more girls active, that's certainly a huge focus of ours, and it's one of our key pillars in the policy. But I'm also looking at, say, coaching and officiating. How do we ensure that we increase the number of females who are opting to become coaches or referees in the games? Because at the minute, you know, maybe at an introductory level, we're hovering at around 30-35%. But as soon as we progress through the pathway, in coaching particularly, it drops steadily. With, you know, by the time we get to, say, our performance director level in international sports, we only have 2 females across our sports or our governing bodies. And when we come to refereeing, that's lower again, a hell of a lot lower. So that's another area or another target. Then when we look at leadership and governance, would be another key pillar of ours. You know, traditionally, I guess, sports have generally been, they're run by men. Decisions are made by men for both the male and female version or side of the game, and we, like, you know, most organisations across the world, I think, we're recognising that there is a need to increase the number of females and that are taking part in making decisions for sport. So we see that as a huge opportunity. You know, it's gonna take a lot of effort, but we're already seeing a nice shift towards looking at various ways and mechanisms as to how we can increase the number of females on our boards and committees, etc. So look, it's nice and varied for me, I guess. It certainly keeps it interesting every day, but it's a huge job for us to undertake if we want to truly, I guess, create, you know, equal opportunities for females in all sports and no matter what role they play in the sport.
Well, it certainly is an undertaking, and I want to unpack this a little bit more. But it would be remiss of me not to give a plug to your outstanding rugby career, because you did play in 3 Women's Rugby World Cups and ended your career with 50 caps. So well done to you for that. That must have been a milestone in your athletic career.
Of course, you know, pulling on the Irish jersey is an honour, no matter what sport it is. And you're right, yeah, I was pretty honoured to play in 3 World Cups. The first was in 2010. That was a bit of a baptism of fire, you know, heading off to that. And I'd only gotten on the team a couple, maybe 6 months, or 6 to 9 months prior to the World Cup. So it was pretty quick, kind of fast track progression to become, you know, to get up in the starting team and things like that. But from then, you know, steadily grew. I really enjoyed my time in the Irish jersey. I played in the World Cup in 2014 in France, and we beat the Black Ferns, and, you know, just really, really great memories from that. And then 2017, we obviously had the World Cup here in Ireland. It definitely didn't go to plan. It was, you know, you have good memories and you have bad memories of sport, or just when things didn't quite go your way, and that was certainly one where it didn't, but I learned a hell of a lot from it, and, you know, so many things that I can bring. I'm now coaching as well in Belvedere, so you bring a hell of a lot of the stuff that you learned from the highs and lows into what you do now with others on the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to mention it particularly, Nora, because you talked about your involvement in grassroots sport, but you've seen it all the way through to high performance end of things as well. It's quite an expansive career there. And you mentioned meeting the Black Ferns. That must have been a very special moment for Ireland.
Oh yeah, it was, and you don't realize how special it was until a long time afterwards. I mean, like when you're playing the match, well, it was interesting. Like the whole lead up to that tournament, we were never in any doubt that we were going to lose to the Black Ferns or anything. Which is always, when you look back now and you think of how the management were able to develop that feeling and that belief through the whole squad, it's just fascinating. So we always had that confidence going into that tournament. During the match itself, it was all about putting your body in the line. Everyone on the team was so gelled together. You could read what people were going to do. If somebody made a mistake, someone else was immediately, making up for it and pulling you up off the ground or whatever it was. It was just such a wonderful team to be a part of, and something to experience like that was absolutely amazing and something that you'll never forget. So I'm glad, I have those highlights that we can talk about, even though at this stage it feels like it's a distant memory. It was so long ago, but it'll always remain in the history books, I guess, as the first Irish team to beat first New Zealand rugby team. So yeah, it's a nice one to hold on to.
Yeah, totally. As you said, memories that last a lifetime for sure. Well, good for you. And all of that experience you're bringing forward now to this job, Nora. And you mentioned some of the things that you're focusing on. I think you've got 4 target areas, is it, that you've identified? Just talk us through those and the specific problems. I'm curious as to what the particular problems are that you're facing in Ireland, because some of these problems I think are universal with women and girls in sport, but some I want to hear is what particularly you face in Ireland.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are universal, and actually, a lot of the different countries have been really great at supporting me as well. But we might come back to that. But yeah, the likes of New Zealand and places I've learned so much from. But in relation to our particular areas, they are pretty much the same across the globe, but coaching and officiating, as I mentioned, we've quite a low level. I think at the minute our ratio of male to female coaches is 2.1 to 2, or yes, or it's 1 to 2.1 or something like that. So there's a huge kind of scope there to grow. But more importantly for us is the lack of females who are progressing to elite level coaching. It just really falls off when we see as the levels go up, then the number of females go down. So our aim is to find out the barriers for that. Like, what are the particular reasons? I mean, we do have the barriers for other countries and things, but while some of them will be similar in Ireland, I think we'll find that we have to look at closer to home to just figure out what our own barriers are as well. And then the same goes for refereeing. We've got the same objectives for both of those, and we're looking to see, well, what research do we need to have now in order to identify those barriers. But for me, it's more important of how do we then overcome those and what steps and measures do we need to take. So at the minute I'm putting together a coaching group, that will help to develop some of this insight, basically, because while I'm one person and there's a lot of people who I can pull on. We have Sport Ireland Coaching, which is one of our units here in Sport Ireland, who are doing a fantastic job. I just feel that by bringing in some female coaches who have either progress through the coaching pathway, I need to hear what they have to say. I need to know from current female coaches who are trying to make a name for themselves, trying to create a career out of coaching, what are they currently experiencing, or what support do they need? And then also from the service providers, so our national governing bodies and our heads of coaching in those particular areas, what is it that we need to provide across the sector as a whole in order to change the current trend that exists. Then if we jump on to something else, I guess our leadership and governance, when we initially launched the policy, which is back in March, and we looked at our current stats across females are on boards, or the percentage of what was the gender composition on boards, we found that it was about 21%. females. So obviously we want to change that. I mean, we have 60 national governing bodies. Some of those are volunteer-led, but some of them are staff-led as well. But we need to increase the percentage on that. Now, so far we haven't gone down the route of quotas or anything like that, but we have already progressed different actions or different plans in relation to how we can change the makeup of those boards and committees. In our Women in Sport investment that we recently announced, well, it would have been launched with the policy back in March, but a lot of the national governing bodies, they could apply for funding from us. So we would have then released 3 million in funding over the next 2 years. So that was for 2019 and into 2020. So in order to get that funding, they have to apply and outline women in sport programs that they're going to run. Now, thankfully, and what was great to see is the number of sporting organisations that wanted to run female leadership programs and mentoring programs and different ways of getting more females into the decision-making side of the sport as well, fast-tracking them through governance structures, things like that. So, all of that there is very positive, and we're really looking forward to working with the sports sector over the next number of years so that we can start to change that 20-odd% and start getting up more around, go through the 30s and then hit 40%. And ideally, you want your 60-40, male or female, either way. Then the third pillar that we mentioned was the participation. So I think, this is a key one. I mean, whenever the Women in Sport funding first kicked off, it was back in 2005, and that was as a result of some research that we had, which highlighted the participation gradient between males and females. So in around 2007, that participation gradient was about 15.7%. So, obviously it was a massive difference in the number of men and women who were active week to week. Now, thankfully, by 2017, that had dropped to 4.5%. I just recently got the latest figure in that as well, and it's dropped again to 3.4%. So we're seeing that participation gradient is narrowing, and a lot of that will be due to the funding that we provide out to our national governing bodies, our local sports partnerships, in order to develop female programs or initiatives to get more people active. So we'll continue to do a lot of that. We'll continue to look a lot at the teenage girls age bracket, because obviously that's a big focus for ours. At the minute we're developing a coaching girls module, which is aimed at coaches of teenage girls. And the hope from that is we'll be able to, upskill and educate those coaches as to how to maintain and retain girls in the sport. And then the fourth one is visibility. So a key one for us is when we look at print media, about 3% of our print media is dedicated to women or girls or female sports stories, news stories. And obviously that's a way too low, and we want to make a big difference there. That initial piece of research was done 2 years ago. We followed it up this year, and there's been a 1% change, I believe, but we're just waiting on the results. So really, it hasn't shifted too much, even though we're talking an awful lot about how we need to make female sports more visible. It just hasn't occurred. So our aim is to work closely with our media outlets here in Ireland to discover what it is that they require in order to shift that percentage, and so that we can make female news, female stories a lot more visible, both in our print media, but then obviously going further afield, you're looking at TV, etc., etc. So there are 4 pillars. I think they're nice and varied. Certainly loads to look at and lots to do, but probably similar, as we already mentioned, to some of the stuff occurring worldwide as well.
You mentioned there, last of all, the visibility, Nora, and we know that if girls can see their role models, we think of some of the successes you've had in Ireland, not least of all with your hockey team, and the increased visibility there. The girls can see that if they can see it, they can be it, as they say. Now, social media, you talked about print and other medias, but social media and the athletes' social media themselves, of course, helps enormously these days in increasing visibility as well. But we measure, as we always do, obviously column inches, airtime and column inches. Have you seen a shift at all there? Do you think that's made a difference with the success that Ireland has had in recent last couple of years, really?
See, I think the shift has occurred when there's major events on. So say for example, hockey, whenever they were playing their qualifying match here in Ireland, it's on TV, it's in the newspapers, the column inches, they're really given proper airtime. The same now with Six Nations. So in the lead up to Six Nations, we'll see, an article a day probably in each newspaper talking about the women's rugby team, and that will be on TV as well, or be live streamed. With the All Ireland TG Cahir Ireland football final, the audience for that has grown year on year. With, I think it was over 56,000 in Croke Park last year. So when it comes to the major sporting events, the traction is really good, and that's really growing. But now, like day to day, it's not like that. So I could open the newspapers today and I won't see anything in the paper about women's sport. Even though there could be, and there are lots of stories that are out there. So the difficulty is, one, how come we're not getting those stories? And two, if we are getting them, why aren't they being published? So those are things that we have to explore. You mentioned though the whole role modelling and can't see, can't be. There's an organisation over here, so the Federation of Irish Sport have linked up with a marketing agency, and they're doing a great job with the 2020 campaign, which a lot of people would have heard about. So that's kind of has the call to action of getting more people participating, more people watching women's sports, more sport on TV, etc., etc., and more people as spectators in the audience. So I think we're in a space now where a lot of people are talking about this, and a lot of people are motivated to try and create change. So we're definitely in a really good place in order to start actioning some of the stuff that we want to do in women's sport. But I think we still have pretty far to go when it comes to visibility. But as I said, for me, it's more about finding out those concrete reasons as to why aren't we shifting the goalposts, or why aren't we moving quick enough? And I don't think we're even moving with demand. I think the demand is out there now to watch more female sports on TV. I mean, we saw with the World Cup over here, the Soccer World Cup, a couple of our channels showed that on TV, and it was one of the most popular sporting events in Ireland over the summer. Every day in work, people coming in, whether it was a man or woman, and everybody was talking about whatever match was on the TV last night. So I think, that just showed us just the sheer demand that exists now, and people enjoy watching female sports on TV.
Yeah, we're proving that, aren't we, for sure. Now, in terms of the participation of girls, getting girls into sport and then retaining them in sport through those teenage years, which sports are the most popular for Irish girls?
So over here at the minute, we recently did a children's study, and some of the ones that came out on top were basketball. So basketball is quite big in school here. I think a lot of secondary schools have a basketball court, and that seems to be one of the main sports that we play. Then we have our GAA games also. So Gaelic football is our largest female participation sport at the minute. So I think they have maybe 140,000 odd females registered. So a lot of girls would play that in school as well. And then you're looking at athletics would be another big one. But what we are finding is that it looks like it's the team sports nearly that are most popular, but we don't know if that's because those are the only sports that are offered to them. So there's a big thing where we're like, look, are we offering enough sports to the girls? So if I don't want to play soccer or basketball or football or the normal team sports that exist, what else is there for me to do? So we are seeing athletics is definitely gaining a bit of momentum, but there are so many other sports out there. It's how do we give girls access to those type of sports as well. We're also seeing, a lot of schools and particularly the local sports partnerships. So I don't know if you'd be familiar with our local sports partnerships, but they're basically like they're positioned. We've 29 of those across the country, and their aim is to increase sport and physical activity participation levels in their local community. So they work to develop clubs, coaches, etc. They do a bit of education, but they also look at targeted programs. So we fund them, we give them some women in sport funding, and a lot of those would try to set up kind of teenage girls physical activities in secondary schools. So now what we're seeing is they'll go out and they'll consult with the girls, they'll find out what activities they want to do, and then they'll provide that for them. So we're seeing an increase in the likes of yoga, Pilates, glow sports, so glow football, glow basketball, those kind of things. Dance as well would be another one that's growing. So just showing you that when we actually go out and talk to the girls, now we're able to deliver the sports that they want to try, or the physical activity that they want to try. But I guess it's maybe early doors in a way, and we're certainly looking at that now to see, well, can we develop say participation programs for teenage girls in those particular areas, and be able to hand a local sports partnership or a local sports organisation a program that's easy to follow, step-by-step guide as to how they can deliver the program that delivers then what the teenage girls want in those areas. Because I think like a big thing is understanding why girls come training, understanding why they show up, and what are their motivations for being physically active or for joining a sports team. And I think we can just probably do more there to make coaches and sports providers aware of those, so that they can then provide them whenever the girls show up for the session.
So what do you see as the major barriers then, Nora, to turn those figures around?
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting. So it depends which target group you're going after as well. But even as that, family culture. So you mentioned parents, like they are so important, and particularly the mother. If your children, like if your toddlers see you, heading out for your run every night of the week, or grabbing your gym bag and going to the gym, if they see that as it's normal to be active every single day, or if the family are active at the weekend, so what are they doing outside? Are they walking, cycling to school? Do they do the park runs? All these things. If you're one of those parents that are bringing your children up from the age of 1 month to just that sport and being physically active is normal, then that immediately is overcoming one of the key barriers where it's just part of the daily life. So I think, like, as any couples out there, any young parents out there who have just had children, really you can't emphasize enough the impact that they can have on their children's attitude towards sport or towards physical activity, and how that can then influence them for the next 20 odd years. So sometimes it's a scary thought to think, but that's absolutely huge. Then when you look at different target groups then as well, so you've obviously got your girls who are moving from primary school to secondary school. That's a big kind of drop-off rate. So what are the interventions there? If you're trying to keep girls in your sport, as I mentioned already, are you hitting those motivations that they want? So when girls come training, they're only there because they want to hang out with their friends. So that's one of the key things. They're there because they want to learn something new, they want to be challenged, they want to feel like they're working hard. And I think sometimes coaches, a lot of people say, like, oh, it's very different coaching boys and girls. There are certainly differences, but the difference isn't in how hard the girls want to work, or how much they want to be breathing heavily, and they still want to walk away knowing that they've learned a new skill and they're able to execute a new skill, or they, if you have skill sessions or target practice or something like that, they want to get their 10 shots out of 10 over the bar, or whatever it might be. Like that, those challenges is what the girls need and want. But then as you get older, I think the whole issue of confidence and things like that and self-image come into it. So I would hear a lot about how girls don't want to do PE in school. And when you look into it, you'll hear, reasons like, I don't want to go back to class sweaty, which is fair enough. But then I don't understand why the teachers in schools can't give the girls, finish the class 15 minutes earlier, which allows them the time to cool down a bit, try and get rid of their red face, fit their makeup back on and feel more comfortable going back to class. So rather than lose half the class to dropping out of the PE session altogether, make some small changes like that, which means that they'll still do it. So, and then other things like hair dryers in changing rooms, in schools, etc. Stuff like ensuring that, so consulting with the girls around training sessions, the time of training sessions, matches, etc. I heard a story from a local coach who was saying, it's really annoying, we have training on Friday, and then once a month nobody shows up to training. And when they actually looked into it, it was because, well, that particular Friday is the Friday that the disco happens. So the girls aren't going to come training because they have to get ready for the disco. So it's just being able to find out these reasons and then working around the girls to consult with them and find out what they want from their training session, when they want it. So it's all about that right time, right place, right price, etc.
So do you get a sense then from the work that you've done there already, Nora, of the level of retention, how you keep these girls in the sport after school and even making a career in it, but well beyond playing in school?
Yeah, well, we in Ireland, we have a situation where it's like they'll play sports both in school and outside of school as well in sports clubs. So it's not really one or the other, which I know in some countries it can be. So we very much go across both. So if you play rugby in school, it's more than likely that you're playing rugby outside of school in a rugby club as well. So you might have matches during the week in school and then you match at the weekend for your club. So it's kind of ensuring that you're looking after well, I suppose the whole load that's put on girls as well. Like you were talking about, when they transition out of school, then they would have been doing leaving cert and exam subjects and things like that. We're working hard to try and change the trend of, just because you have exams doesn't mean you should stop training to study more. Like that doesn't work. So it's trying to highlight that. But as they then go into into college, university, they do start to explore. Now, what my aim with the sporting organisations or the national governing bodies is that can we provide then the opportunity for girls to explore at that later age. So what are the offerings that we provide in our sport that allows somebody who's never played before to then join? And how welcoming are we? Have we pitched it at the right level? How have we communicated it? Is it easy for them to find a new sport to join into? So that's something that we'll look at this year, just to see how do we make that easier for people to transition between sports, because we'll have the athletes who excel and you would hope that they stay. You'd hope that they stay because they are aiming to be or to try and be an elite athlete. But then there's others who purely participate for that because they know it's good for them, and to look good and all these type of things. So we have to ensure that we keep them involved as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All of those things, so many different factors here and moving parts as well. And then the option, of course, for them not just to do sport for life, but also take up a career in sport as well. So I hope anyone who's listening to this will see some of the many things that are evolving around women's sports, and not just in Ireland, but around the world. But clearly, you've got a very good focus there with your 4-point mission there, your 4-point focus, Nora. It's interesting to see. And you've got the funds too. I saw that the government has put funds into this project.
Yeah, and the government have been really good at funding the Women in Sport programme. As I mentioned, 2005 was the very first time that dedicated funding was put into it. So I think it's like over 19 million to date, and then we obviously have the 3 million that's gone out between last year and this year. And the indication is that would continue. But you were talking about, worldwide, and certainly from my perspective, if there are people listening to this who feel that they can contribute either from a research point of view or just, willing to send on ideas that they've done in their own country, for me, that would be so beneficial. So I'd welcome any support like that. And vice versa, if there's anybody listening to this who wants to get in touch, anything like that, please just drop me a line. Twitter is probably easiest, just Nora Stapleton is my Twitter handle there, but definitely get in touch with me because I'm certainly willing to share. And as I mentioned, the likes of people in New Zealand, Australia have been, and the UK have been really good to me in sharing some of the stuff that they have, which has just been invaluable.
Yeah, fantastic. And tell us also how we reach you online as well, the organisation, how they can find out more about it.
Yeah, so sportireland.ie, that would kind of outline everything that Sport Ireland does, and we've recently just opened up a Women in Sport page there, so we'll start to add to that now over the coming months and start to build a bit of a resource bank there of what we're doing, some of the programmes that we're investing in, and yeah, just any other information that we think would be valuable for, I guess it's looking at, who in Ireland needs to know this information and find it useful, but certainly anybody outside of Ireland as well. I think it'd be like I'm the same. I'm constantly looking up other countries and trying to find new stuff, so I'm sure people will do that as well with ours.
Well, that's grand, Nora. Thank you very much for coming on the show and sharing that with us, and the very, very best of luck. Oh, well, and good luck at in the Six Nations too.
Yeah, thanks very much. Here's to Ireland coming back and winning some more games this year.
Hi, I'm the lovely Beatrix, and every month I have an exclusive interview with someone from the world of roller derby. Join me for a peek inside the sport here on Wisp Sports, wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to follow me on social media. I'm at the lovely Beatrix.
And our thanks again to Nora Stapleton for explaining all the work that she's doing over there in Ireland for girls and women in sport. And you can find links to her organisation and social media by hopping over to our website at wispsports.com, go to the Listen tab and drop down to Transcending Sport, and you'll find this episode on the top of the page there. And as Nora said, she does welcome any feedback you may have from anywhere in the world about the work that you're doing in girls and women in sport. So do drop her a line. You can also send an email to us and we can forward that too. And our email address is info@wispsports.com. You can join in the conversation on our social media anytime by following and sharing @Wisp Sports. Until the next time, thank you for listening and helping us to turn up the volume on women's sports.